I am your host, Leah Dunlap, and you are listening to the Oracle on Purpose podcast, where we help intentional leaders clarify their purpose and next steps to create a work and life of significance. Welcome to the Oracle on Purpose podcast, where we guide conscious leaders to push past their upper limits so that their expanded vision becomes their reality. I'm your host, Leah Dunlap. Today, I am honored to bring a passionate marriage and family therapist and life coach who helps couples have difficult conversations in healing ways and coaches entrepreneurs through their mindset with resilience at the core of her work. My guest today is Dr. D, also known as Dr. Maria Mercedes Dominguez. She's a PhD in LMFT, is a bilingual and multicultural licensed marriage and family therapist and life coach. Her work focuses on cultivating resilience and using it as a tool for empowerment with each client to guide them in transforming their own mindsets, emotions, and relationships. She began her journey in the mental health field 13 years ago. The rise of online services has allowed Dr. D to serve busy entrepreneurs, attorneys, artists, and professionals at their convenience. Whether helping a couple have difficult conversations in healing ways or coaching an entrepreneur through their mindset, resilience is at the core of her work. Welcome to the show, Dr. D.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so happy to be here and speak with you today.
I am so thrilled that I get to share you. You're such a bright light. If you're listening to this, don't worry, but trust me, go watch the YouTube video so you can see Dr. D's amazing smile and your day will be made, okay? I'm just telling you, if you ever feel like you're a little down, come watch this video. You just radiate so much light and joy, and I really appreciate that you took the time out of your busy schedule to come share your goodness with my group and my crew. I know that one of the things that oftentimes my clients who are entrepreneurs are, they're a big part of what we do in our work is relating with clients and customers, and a big chunk of what entrepreneurs have to do just to really make it in the world is to deal with their own stuff, right? Like we all know, if you really want to be a thriving entrepreneur, you cannot avoid looking at your own stuff. And so I'm really excited to have you here to talk about how that emotional intelligence can really affect our results as entrepreneurs and how resilience plays a part in that. So I'm curious, as I always am with any of the guests that I bring on, to find out a little bit more about, for you, what is the purpose? What was the why to bring you to your work? What made the work you do feel so aligned with your purpose? And how do you keep that alignment?
Yeah. I am noticing that my purpose is evolving as I am. So what first brought me to the health and healing space was seeking understanding of my own life experiences and how things were playing out in my own family history. And then that evolved into not only being able to heal and recover for myself, but then being able to share that knowledge and wisdom with those around me. And then now it's evolved to a space where, especially with everything that we've been dealing with in the past over a year, we've been impacted in so many ways. I have learned how important it is for us to create bubbles of sanctuary, bubbles of peace, bubbles of safety, and knowing how to do that so that we're still aware of everything that's happening around us, but we can claim sovereignty over our mind, over our relationships, and ensure that everything that's kind of happening in the environment doesn't necessarily have to seep into our homes or seep into our minds and hearts. And so now where I feel my purpose is right now is teaching other people how to create those bubbles for themselves, where home can be sanctuary, where mind and heart and body can feel safe. And my vision is that we have all of these bubbles all around the globe, and we'll be able to combine and create just a safer and healthier and more loving and secure environment for generations to come.
That's such an important piece to the idea that that our own sovereignty can actually help to create better relationships, which seems kind of counterintuitive when you first think about it, right? We feel like you said, this has been a year right now. If you're listening to this, we're just on the other side of 2020 and 2021, and we've learned what it's like to be isolated as a whole, as a community, as a world, what that isolation can look like. And so it's interesting to think that by having our sovereignty, that we can actually be better community with each other and in better community. I see that as something for entrepreneurs, because it was such a kind of a standard to be out and going and making connections and networking. And I saw that a lot for them, for my own clients through the year, that how do we do this now with this different kind of setup that we were made to kind of create connections over Zoom and virtually, but also, as you mentioned, like there's also a breakdown of live work space, right? We're on constantly, we're on Zoom, we're in our family environment, we're at home perhaps, and it feels like there's no space between the two. So I could see like the idea of having a concept of a bubble where this is sacred, as you said, this is sanctioned away from the rest, so that you do still have maybe a better reserve to come back to the work that you're trying to do and to communicate and connect with people on a different level. I love that idea that, having those bubbles actually does kind of protect us. And I would imagine then too, play into that idea of being resilient and being able to show up in resilience. Can you talk a little bit more about when we say the word resilience and emotional intelligence, how do those play together, specifically if you're someone who's an entrepreneur right now or a leader in some way that's out there working in the world?
Yeah. One of the reasons I love working with leaders and entrepreneurs is because they already have the mechanisms in place and they use them successfully in business. So all we need to do is bridge those same mechanisms into your personal life, into the way that you relate to yourself and the way that you relate to your most important relationships. To be successful in business, we need to know how to communicate clearly. We need to know what our expectations are, how we're measuring progress, what the outcome is and what we're expecting, and be able to communicate that to our team or to our customers, things along those lines. Those same mechanisms we need to practice in our personal lives. Many times we can be great communicators on the job or professionally, but then at home we'll bite our tongue more often, or we'll just try to quote unquote keep the peace. So we won't say what's really on our mind, but it's necessary for us to do that so we can address the elephant in the room or prevent the Cold War that's been happening within the marriage recently, or things along those lines. So assertive communication is a big piece of it that a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs already have down pat, but they may not always practice it in their personal lives.
That's such a great, that term, assertive. Assertive, yes. Because I think when we think of assertive, it feels very hard. And I think a lot of the women, a lot of the people that listen to me and follow me are women. And so that, we've kind of, I think, adapted that assertiveness in our business roles when we entered the business world, thinking that was gonna, that's how you do. And so tell me a little bit more about how that plays out when we bring that home, that assertive communication. How, because I'm hearing all these bells go off for people going, well, yes, but then, literally, what do we think? They won't like me, right? Then there'll be a battle, as you said, like maybe it's a Cold War, but it's cold, versus the eruption that might happen if I do speak up. So what do you think some of those key factors are about having assertive communication in a healthy way to really create, I would imagine, actually create more connection, less division?
Absolutely. Yeah, we need to communicate so that we could turn towards each other. The avoidance of communication is where we see more distance in any type of relationship. So learning how to turn towards is really important. One of the first steps that is essential in this is understanding and accepting that you can be assertive and kind at the same time. And so that's what we want to make sure we're doing. We're practicing the both. And I can be assertive and I could be my kind, compassionate, loving, respectful self at the same time. In the business spaces, we may not need to add all of those other parts, right? Because things are usually a little bit more cut and dry. But of course, in our relationships with our spouses or our children's or our friends, we know we need to be assertive, but we also know we want to practice respect and kindness and love. And knowing how to do that is part of like some of the techniques that I share. So one, you asked me about emotional intelligence earlier. So one is being aware of what your emotion is trying to communicate to you. So if you're being irritated by something, or if you're feeling angry by something, or if you're feeling a little bit of sadness around something, knowing what that's communicating to you. So you make sure that when you do speak up, you're speaking to the meat and potatoes. You're speaking to the main point.
Speaking to the meat and potatoes. I like that. Okay.
Like we're hitting the bullseye on what it is that we're trying to say. And that helps us have more clear conversations. And it also prevents argument because if we can understand, okay, I'm feeling this about this. This is what this message is trying to communicate to me. What is it that I need? What is it that I'm asking for? What is it that I'm expecting? What is it that I would like to see? And then just taking ownership over that and saying, look, I felt this way when this happened. And moving forward, I would like to see this, or I would like us to try this, or I really need this never to happen again because this hurt me deeply. But just really owning your part, owning what you feel, owning what you need, and clearly communicating that, clearly requesting that, and then seeing how or what responses you get. But just that in and of itself, you could be assertive and you can be kind at the same time.
I think that's interesting you said that, because I think when people think of assertion, they think it is that kind of masculine heavy-handedness. And what I'm hearing, and this is something I was just looking at my notes because I was just thinking, this is something we were talking about recently in one of my groups, which is the understanding heart, right? To come from an understanding heart that we are all literally, maybe failing miserably, but we are all trying to do our best. And I think when we show up to communication, and actually I would challenge the idea that we don't need to have that kindness in business. I think oftentimes that's something that's a value that women bring to the table, is that it can be that kindness, that understanding, that does temper even your business communications and your business connections when we are assertive and still understanding. I would venture to guess that if we were to reach that happy medium on both sides, that we would thrive as individuals, but also then our success would be heightened as well. Which brings me to another question, and that is, for me, I know that one of the things that I'm consistently aware of is that my goal is really to help move people down the path towards their purpose and their prosperity. Right? It's very clear, it always has been. And the reason is that I feel that once people are actually aligned with their purpose and they're learning how to prosper on that path, they become happier, they become more emotionally stable and understanding and kind. And in that commitment, they not only become the representation of that, the inspiration for other people as well, but it does change how we work together as a community when more and more people are showing up, feeling resourced, feeling abundant, feeling purposeful. So I'm curious for you, how you see your work having an impact, and a positive impact, obviously, on this world.
I work with a lot of people who have powerful ripple effects in our communities, in our policy, in our finances, in our education system. And so I see my purpose as being the behind the scenes person that helps ensure everyone's grounded and they're making their decisions from a place of centeredness. I have seen sometimes things at home aren't going really well and we haven't addressed it. And then next thing you know, we're like slamming our fists in the boardroom reading. And it really had nothing to do with what happened at the boardroom, but it triggered all of this unresolved tension that has been building up in the family or, you know, at home or things like that. So helping people create safe and stable foundations where we're rooted, which typically is in our home life and just within self, that allows us to show up so much more intentionally in our professional work and allow our ripple effects, or some of us are wave makers, allowing our waves to push out with more intention and purposefulness as well, because we're not as reactive, we're operating from a place of groundedness.
Right. I know you shared with me a story about a client that you had recently who had a really huge impact that maybe he wouldn't have had he been, before he worked with you, in the light of the fact that he was not as confident. So can you tell us a little bit about that, like the general idea of what that story was and where he actually, the impact that was made with that work?
Yeah. So this is a story of a young man who was in an unhealthy relationship. And that was taking up the majority of his attention, the majority of his resources, the majority of like his intellect. And this time was being invested in a relationship that was detrimental to his health, to his finances, to many areas of his life. Once he was able to like ground himself, create alignment within himself, tap back into his core values, practice the assertive communication that we train and coach on, release the passive aggressiveness, which sometimes then turns into explosive reactions and just like, look, this is where I am right now. This is what I think right now. This is what I feel right now. This is what I need right now. And just being calm, cool, and collected and just who I am and being able to communicate from that, then the relationship could no longer be, right? Because he was no longer functioning the way he was functioning before that allowed that relationship to maintain. So a lot of times when we have an individual doing their work, the effect on the relationship, either the other partner upgrades themselves as well so that we could create a new norm here, or the tension creates some kind of schism and break because the evolution on this side, if this person becomes more rigid and like resists the change, then some kind of break at some point happens. But more often than not, in healthy bonds where we have that secure love, like we see that the couples end up growing together. One just might be going at another pace than the other.
Right.
In this example, it was unhealthy, so it was pruning, it was shedding. And then he was able to redirect his attention to the things that he was interested in, continue to pursue his professional interests. And now he's in a totally different ball game. He's leading and creating organizations and teams and being offered significant contracts. And of course, on the dating scene again, but very intentional about who is it that I'm attracted to? What is it that I'm looking for in a relationship? And being able to communicate that clearly while dating, but then also communicate that clearly to the team that he now governs and operates. And just a totally different place because he knows who he remembers who he is, and he's able to communicate for himself clearly.
I think that piece, remembering who we are, and as we talk to the people that are listening here that are out there working towards something and feel like they're off alignment in their purpose, or they're frustrated, or like you said, they're having these kind of outbursts, that it is an indicator that, for me, that story also shares that once we are taking care of ourselves, and once we are balanced, and once we are aligned, we actually get to show up and do the work that the world is expecting of us, right? The universe is hoping we will show up and do. And what I really love about that, as you were saying it, is this piece of the team, as you said, that he got to lead, the people and the projects that he's a part of now, because he is more confident, that all of that is going to have an effect on the world because he did that work with you, because we took the time, right? As healers and coaches, because you're doing your work, other people are impacted. And that's how we make the biggest change in the world. It isn't about tearing down buildings or, building bridges, unless it is, but sometimes it is those small changes we make within ourselves that help us to show up, as you said, and do our work so that we can be there for that outpicturing, whatever that looks like, on a global scale, even if it's just our one small voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. So I love that you're doing this work. And, I know that we kind of touched a little bit on the vision piece, right? Tell me a little bit more, as you've been in the field for a long time, and we kind of tapped into this. So I'm hoping I'm maybe putting you a little bit on the spot, but I know we talked about this in how you do your work and how the industry itself can kind of put some limits on how you have a capacity to have an impact. And one of the things that I was noting, because I used to work in an environment where I worked with therapists all around me, was there was this sense that there was a bit of lack and stuckness around the work itself and how to get it done and how to get it into the right hands and how to create abundance for themselves so that they could actually, mirror, right? Model, if you will, that for other people. So can you talk to me a little about, like, when you look at your impact and then you look at your vision, what do you think you would love to see for your future and for the way that you do your work in the world?
Yeah. I am grateful for being in those spaces where I felt limited, because it was that friction that communicated to me, oh, heck no, like I didn't come here for this. So in those spaces, many times, like, if it's not our training, it might be our employment that says you can only help in this way, or you need to follow this manual, or you need to focus on the symptoms or the illness. And then once you get them to baseline, then let them go and focus on the next symptom and the next illness. And being in those spaces, that's when I realized that is very important work. And I still do that work. And I know that there is more to the story than that. It's not just about us figuring out how to survive, but it's about us figuring out how to live and thrive once we do that. And so that's when I started learning and exploring more in just the general healing arts and the coaching industry, because I want to serve at those levels as well. I don't want to just stay at the good enough. Okay, I was able to function. My daily functioning isn't impacted. I want to encourage people to visualize. I want to encourage people to dream. I want to encourage people to be creative. I want to encourage people to take more proactive roles in changing the way that their life looks and feels, not only for themselves, but for their families, for future generations. And so me being in those spaces that said, nah, you're doing too much. Only do this right here. You just got to make sure that, their sleep patterns get back to normal, or whatever the case may be. I knew I wanted to participate in this part too. Mm-hmm. Then I knew that I had to expand the ways in which I allowed myself to serve, because I could have just stayed there. But I knew that I didn't feel that was enough for me. So then I practice what I preach, and I'm like, so what is it that I need? Okay, I'm gonna go get that need met. And then I did. And so I'm just expanding the spaces where I allow myself to be present.
So important to do that, to see that we have been given, and we were talking about that, we have been given oftentimes this idea that we should be happy with enough. That is such a fallacy, that the idea that enough is all that's available to us, right? So oftentimes, as you were saying, the constructs of our society are kind of built around that. Be happy with enough. And what I've seen in the last few years, and especially recently, and I've talked about much, probably to ad nauseum maybe, is the idea that there is no limit. To me, the possibilities are limitless when we understand, as you said, that we know inside of ourselves, like there is a part of us who knows exactly what we are, exactly who we are, exactly where we are meant to serve and show up. And it is a kind of behooves us to listen to that voice and to take action, which I'm so glad. And I know your clients and your patients are so glad that you took that leap for yourself. So as people are listening to this, I think that's very inspiring to know that you were in those constructs. And as you said, you saw this is not enough for me. I'm going to go do it my way in this other way. What would you say to people that are listening to this now in relationship to that resilience factor of how do we take a leap? What are the things that will help them be more resilient as they take that leap to do more, as they go out in their own work and in the world?
Yeah. When you hear that small voice, honoring it, because that small voice is what builds our confidence. That small voice is what grows our resilience. So once we kind of get that whisper, honoring it, doing something about it, taking the smallest action, like even if it seems like it's not significant, but the smallest step you take that's in alignment with that is expanding your integrity. It's allowing you to stand firmer in the truth of who you are. So doing that more and more often is going to allow just you to expand, but even your awareness of that voice and being able to hear that voice more and more clearly and step into it more and more powerfully, practice more and more, vision, faith, and just confidence in, I can make that happen. The more and more we take those little steps is really important. And resilience to me is not about surviving. Resilience is about being able to thrive in whatever circumstance we're in, making it work. So resilience is all about growth. It's all about transformation. It's all about stepping into a level that most people probably wouldn't have expected you to, given the circumstances. But it's okay, let me see what's around me, what's possible with what I've been given, and what can I make with that?
Oof. And
then practicing that.
I love it. What can you make with what is inside you and around you? That is the final thought for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Maria and Dr. D, for being here to share your brilliance and your insight on resilience. We have a special gift. I'm going to have Dr. D talk to you a little bit about what she's got to offer you. And don't worry, if you're driving or listening to this, we will have the link in the comments, so you can always come back and grab that link. But I wanted to give you a little idea of what she's got for you today, and then we will sign off. So go ahead and share what you brought to share with the audience today.
Yes, I have an interactive typable PDF. It's called Transform Limiting Beliefs. So if you notice that there's a gnawing thought that's kind of preventing you from honoring that voice, or maybe speaking up, with something that's been on your mind for quite some time, go ahead and the link will be in the description, and you can click on it, and it's going to be a series of questions. It also comes with a video where you can have me walk you through the exercise as well, and you could just pause it to give you time to type out your answers. And I'm confident that by the end of the exercise, you will be so much more aware of the power and authority you have over your own mind and thoughts.
Oof, there it is. The power and authority over your own mind and thoughts. All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Maria, for being here. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Leah Dunlap, Oracle on Purpose, and this is the Oracle on Purpose podcast. Remember, no matter what, you are here on purpose. Thanks for tuning in to the Oracle on Purpose show. If you found value in this episode, we'd appreciate you leaving a comment. Also, you can subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't yet. If you'd like to get clear on your highest vision and next steps, go to oracleonpurpose.com. See you next week.